meeting to order. If the deputy clerk would note who's in attendance. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes from the February 9, 2016 meeting. I have one change on the minutes. If you could go to the top of page 4. It states, Mr. Atwater asked, have they identified anything other than the PLC and the inverter? Actually, what I said was, I asked if they have identified any other single point of failure other than the PLC and the inverter. I think that's an important clarification in terms of what we're discussing at that point. So that's my only change. Does anyone else have any other changes to the minutes?
Also move for approval.
A second?
And that would be as amended.
Yes.
Okay. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay. Second item is electing a chairman. And before we get started on that, I just want to note for the record to thank Scott Stradley for his service over the last year. As he had pointed out in one of the meetings, we had a heck of a lot of meetings involving the Orlando Utilities Commission revised contract, and I think at the end of the day, his work along with other members of the commission at that time got us to a better contract than the one that we were originally presented with. So just going to note that for the record. So with that, I'll call out for nominations for chairman.
I'd like to nominate our vice chair to move into the chair position.
Okay. Any others? I would nominate Laura Moss. My only concern about being a nominee is for chairman, being the Indian River Shores representative. I'm just a little concerned that there'll be some people in the community that'll think that I'll have motives other than trying to lower the cost of service as much as possible and make it reliable. And I know there might be some in the press that might raise that issue. That's my only concern about being chairman.
Well, based upon that, then I would second the motion for Laura.
Okay, is there any other nominees? Okay, let's have a vote for Laura as chairwoman. I'm assuming she's willing to accept.
Yes, I am.
Okay. If she's the only nominee, then she's automatic appointed.
All right, okay, fair enough. So congratulations, and I'll give you the gavel. So you're in charge.
Thank you, everyone. And our next order of business is a presentation. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Public comment. Seeing none. New business. If anyone has any.
George, do you want to talk about the article that you had sent out?
I thought it would come under members' matters.
All right, okay. Fair enough. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, then we'll go to old business, which would be the solar project presentation by Ms. Michelle Jackson.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman. Good morning, commission members. Thank you. Okay. Good morning to the public. Thanks for inviting me to come to speak to you today. I know that the Vero Beach Utilities Commission has been considering solar projects, and what I wanted to do today was share with you some of the research and the information that FMPA has gathered, because FMPA is considering entering into a solar photovoltaic project as well. I'd like to thank Judy for inviting me to come. Judy has listened into some of the meetings that FMPA's Conservation and Renewable Energies Advisory Committee has held, and a lot of the information that we've gathered has been shared with our advisors. So I'm just thankful to be here today to share with you what we've learned about solar photovoltaic projects, and especially some considerations in particular for Florida municipal utilities. So first of all, why consider solar energy? In your agenda package, we prepared a paper and a lot of detail on cost. I don't want to get into that kind of detail today, though you have that for reference. And if you need any other reference materials, you could let Judy know, and Judy could contact me, and I could send some reports that we've commissioned. But first of all, so why consider solar energy? We know it's expensive.
Before you begin, may I ask just one question about the memo we received? I was just curious. It seemed to be almost contradictory, and I was hoping you could explain it. It's on page 1 of the memo, and it says that in the history, and this is the last sentence under solar PV history, which is page 1, it says, due to a steady decline in technology prices and with the assistance of federal and state subsidies. Then immediately below that, solar limitations, it says, however, the high cost of PV modules and equipment, how does that jive, or are we talking about two different things? I wasn't sure how to interpret that.
No, that's great, Laura. In fact, if you go back to the history of when photovoltaics were first invented, they're 100 times more expensive than they are today. Gradually through the years, the prices have come down. But they're not down to a point where they're competitive with traditional central power plants. For example, the U.S. DOE's Energy Information Administration, and I included a chart in your paper, cites that if you were to construct a solar PV project today and compare it with other traditional technologies, the cost of electricity from a solar PV plant is 78% greater than the cost of electricity from a conventional natural gas-fired combined cycle facility, similar to FMPA's Treasure Coast and Cane Island 4 plants, which are relatively new gas-fired facilities. So that's what I mean. It's still relatively expensive technology. In fact, I mean, think about it from a household perspective. And another piece of information that I cited here is that homeowners will install rooftop systems. Those systems will cost about $30,000. Now, if we know solar energy only produces energy when the sun's shining, you can imagine the time of payback, and where payback would be a form of reducing the cost from the electric utility that's serving them. But the amount of time it would take to pay back that $30,000, it's relatively expensive.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so the prices come down, but it's still very high
It's
for
still
the average user.
It's still high compared to conventional electric generating technologies.
Do your calculations take into account for a private investor the 30% investment tax credit plus the accelerated depreciation in the first 2 years of the life of the plant?
Yeah, in fact, the chart that's in your paper from the EIA actually shows the cost with and without subsidies. And so there is a dramatic price difference once the 30% investment tax credit is. And you're right, and the 5-year accelerated depreciation benefit. We'll talk a little bit about that. I think what we've seen at FMPA is really a lot of pressure from the supply side of the market. We're getting calls left and right because there are a lot of investors out there interested in gaining advantage of federal tax incentives. So just another thing for you to consider.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
What is the average payback that you assume for rooftop solar equipment for a homeowner?
In the studies we've done, it's 40 to 50 years.
40 to 50 years.
Correct.
That's longer than the life of the panels.
Probably.
If I could, the Solar Nation website that you cite quotes an average residential installation of 5 kilowatts with a $21,000 installation cost. Minus the 30% is a $14,700 installation cost then to the homeowner, with an estimated payback period of 12 years. And then
that sounds more reasonable, because I had a quote recently for a solar installation, and I figured out it was about a 10-year payout.
Right.
And the base cost was like $24,000, but minus the 30%. That's, I think, 16 or 17,000.
Right, and those calculations don't include the benefit to the homeowner and resale value. So,
But can you extrapolate from that to a commercial farm, a private solar source, versus the installation necessary for a commercial farm? Mm-hmm. I don't think you can take the two and equate the payback of the commercial farm to be calculated the same as you would for a private.
I'm sure, but I'm sure there's economies of scale that would improve the payback.
I'd like to point out something. This is really an interesting discussion, and there's a lot of debate on payback. And I'll tell you why Solar Nation might be able to quote that, because they might be citing customers who are living in California in PG&E service territory. PG&E has a net metering tariff that currently pays 32 cents a kilowatt hour for any excess energy fed into the grid. Also, those net metered customers get that credit off of their bill. PG&E has time of use rates. Electricity is 20 cents a kilowatt hour during the peak period. Now, there's pressure across the nation with public service utility commissions hearing appeals from utilities on changing net metering laws. And in fact, Arizona is successfully appealing their service commission to state that net metering rates should be at wholesale. So if any excess solar is fed into the grid, they should only be paid the wholesale cost. So a rooftop customer has to be very careful when hearing from different vendors about payback, because a lot of the payback equation depends on net metering legislation and the utilities' current rates. There's also a great movement across the country where utilities are realizing that rooftop customers aren't paying their fair share of the fixed costs of the distribution system. So when you think about it, a rooftop customer is sitting there a few hours of the day, not using the electric grid, but then leaning on the grid at night. And because of the way utilities charge customers for their fixed costs, there is cross-subsidization happening. So a new movement across the nation to rethink rate making. And in fact, if anything's going to come out of the two proposed constitutional amendments, actually only one has made its way to the Florida Supreme Court for evaluation for the 2016 ballot. If anything comes out of these proposals that are going forward, it will be for utilities to think hard and fast about new rates, because solar's coming and current rate design hasn't really put that into the mix for cost recovery purposes. Okay, so why consider energy? To meet renewable energy goals, the EPA's Clean Power Plan, this is a great time for utilities, especially utilities with coal, to think about and investing in renewable energy. In fact, when we talk about what other municipals in Florida have done, you'll see that the coal municipals are really embracing renewable energy, and we think it's positioning them better to handle the Clean Power Plan. Bullet number 2, there's growing customer interest in clean energy. You're probably seeing it. There are regulatory policies emerging across the country that would allow third parties to install solar energy and sell that to utility customers. And again, the big reason to consider solar is customers want it. So that's some of the research we've done. We've backed it up. Seminole Electric Co-op surveyed, working with their distribution co-op, surveyed members, and there's some interesting statistics from a survey. Bullet number 3, 43% are willing to pay a 5-cent premium for energy from a block of solar energy. But the last bullet, 53% of those felt that those who don't want solar shouldn't subsidize those who do. So again, rate making has to come into the picture here. One of the ways that communities have been installing solar, which is, I think, an excellent model that Florida municipal utilities should consider, is installing solar PV, but putting it in place as a community solar program. And that's a program where you subscribe your retail customers to actually pay for that installation through higher rates for solar energy. And in our research, we calculated that if a typical Florida municipal electric utility was to charge for community solar, we think about a 7 to 8 cent premium on the current price of electricity would probably be the break-even point. And that would also, that kind of a rate would also consider contribution to fixed costs of the distribution system. Any questions about community solar programs? Are you familiar with these? So, as the former acting chairman stated, really it is the investment tax credit that's helping to get solar PV out into the electric utility industry. There's a lot of tax investors or a lot of investors who would like to earn the investment tax credit. And do you all understand how the investment tax credit works?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I was just filling out my taxes, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great if we had invested in a solar PV system? Because that would be a nice way to reduce the taxes owed to the federal government. But you can see that a solar development company with a tax equity partner, if they're building a utility-scale solar PV plant that costs $60 million, that tax equity partner could reduce the taxes they owe to the federal government by $20 million. And I'm sure you know Congress, with this last budget package, just extended the investment tax credit. I have the quote in the paper. I think it's through 2019, and then it will drop from 30% to 26% the next year, and then down to 10% in 2022. So there's a lot of what I'd call supply side pressure as well as demand side pressure for solar PV. This is how a contract structure would work for a municipal utility. You have a tax equity partner that's teamed with a third-party solar developer. Municipal utility would take a power purchase agreement. I then show in dotted lines that utility can then use their solar energy output from the project for a community solar program, and could actually design rates to subscribe that to the retail customer. So that's one model that could make solar PV actually affordable for a utility, even though the cost of the electricity is 78% greater than the cost of electricity from a traditional source.
So, Michelle, I'm having a hard time understanding where you come up with that 78% figure, because looking at your charts in here, it doesn't look anywhere near 78% more.
Yeah, I'm actually citing figure 1 in the paper. That's from the U.S. Energy Information Agency from their 2015 Annual Energy Outlook.
Right.
And what they've done is they've calculated the levelized cost of electricity from various generating sources. So what that means is over the lifetime of these sources, that's the cost of electricity that would be produced.
So you've got solar at 125.3, right?
Right.
And then there's the dotted line that's showing the subsidies, but
Correct.
I don't know what subsidies you're talking about.
That would be the federal, the investment tax
So
credit.
would that be both?
If you were able to take advantage of the federal tax incentives, the dotted line puts it down to about probably $115 per megawatt hour. Now, municipal utilities can't take advantage of the investment tax credit.
Right.
But you can do a sales leaseback type of structure.
Right, and you can do a PPA like this.
Okay, so they can take advantage.
So then we can take advantage.
Right. If right, but again, the tax equity partner and the third-party developer are still in the profit-making mode. You might be able to gain the advantage of part of the 30% investment tax credit.
But that's subject to negotiation.
Correct.
Right.
But
There's plenty of tax equity partners out there looking for investments in a low interest rate environment.
Correct. So, Judy, and then I just point out, utilities today, Florida Power and Light, FMPA, for example, we use conventional and advanced combined cycle technology. So the cost comparison is from $125 to $115 to $72 or $75.
Yeah, it still doesn't work out to 78%.
so what is that percent? Come on, mathematician.
It should be 70.
It's about 50% by those
Okay,
numbers.
with the subsidies. Okay,
With
73
subsidies.
without.
Correct. No.
Stand corrected.
No. Yeah, you may be right.
Okay. All right, so contract structure with a PPA, we think this is probably the ideal way to go, as former chairman stated.
Yeah, I guess I'm still having trouble with these numbers. We had a presentation from Con Ed Solutions that came in to potentially put a solar farm on our airport. And if the power, and they want to do a PPA with the utility, and if the power costs 78% more, why would they have even walked in the door? Are your numbers looking backwards in time, or are they looking at the cost of panels? The panels have dropped very dramatically over the past few years because the Chinese have their industry has tremendous overcapacity. So Con Ed Solutions came in and was interested in doing with us, and we're sure as heck not going to pay 78% or 50% more power. It'll be over the dead bodies of this utility commission, I think. So I'm just having trouble with your numbers here. I really am. I mean, you're seeing the amount of solar power installations just skyrocket. So that doesn't jive with a 78% higher number.
Right. In fact, EIA just came out that they expect more than 26 gigawatts of utility-scale generating capacity to be added in 2016. Of that, 9.5 gigawatts is solar. And if these actual additions reflect these plans, 2016 will be the first year in which utility-scale solar additions exceed additions from any other single energy source. So, right, let's just think about it. You're right. The price of panels has dropped dramatically. And in fact, in the last 4 years, it's come down threefold. I've just put up a slide and so we did some research. We wanted to know, we went to Black and Veatch, and we invested our members' money in a study for our members, and Judy, I think, has access to it already. But what is the cost? If you just looked at all the cost elements, what does it physically cost to construct a plant? And I want to impart that to you so that when you look at PPAs, you have a benchmark and you can try to understand what's in here. You're hearing things, we hear things all over the news. I got a PPA for $70 a megawatt hour. Come to find out, once you add Orange County improvement tax, it's now $85 a megawatt hour. Oh, and by the way, the utility gave them the land and did the interconnection. So, again, there's all these permutations. When you're hearing pricing, really have to do discovery. What's in there, what's not. The modules there's two major components of constructing and installing a PV facility. There's the engineering, procurement, and construction, or EPC, is 87% of the cost. The other indirect costs, 13%. The other indirects would be your land, permits for the land, studies to interconnect, and any interest during construction if you took out a construction loan. I then broke out the components of the EPC. Modules are 40%. You've got inverters, racking, electrical equipment, and your I&C construction labor is only 8%. So if there's any efficiencies to be had in modules, you can really see how that could bring the price down. So this is really just a bottom-up piece of guidance that says, all things equal, if I was going to go to the market today and I was going to have them, if I was going to myself purchase the panels and construct the facility, this is the cost breakdown. We then went ahead and looked at the costs. So we added up the current costs, and this was published in September of 2015. So granted, it's almost 6 months old. But we were looking at utility scale facilities, and I think this chart demonstrates the economy of scale that this gentleman cited here. As you go from a 40 kW system, and first of all, I want to point out, when you're talking to developers, be sure you know if they're talking DC or AC. There's a big difference. So a plant, for instance, that has 40.5 megawatts of panels behind the inverter will only put out 30 megawatts at its peak on the best clear day. And so you can kind of see when they quote total installed cost, you want to make sure what's in the denominator. Is it the panels in DC or is it the output in AC? Because it makes a difference in the total installed cost. But if you just look at the total installed cost on a $1 per watt AC basis, you can see the economy of scale as you go bigger. And then you can see the approximate total installed cost of a facility.
But there was a break point at about 5 megawatts, right?
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden your cost kind of stabilizes.
Right.
You can get a lot bigger and you're not going to save a lot more money.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. That's what we've learned. So then the question is, okay, if a PPA provider who probably has a tax equity partner, these costs now, the approximate total installed costs, can be reduced by 30%. What should that look like now in rates? And that's really where the art comes in figuring out what elements of the cost are they not bringing to the table as well. So really we think this report is just good for benchmarking as municipals look to PPAs. Any questions?
Well, just one thing I noticed, if you flip to the screen that showed those cost breakdown, and I'm just trying to think a little bit through the presentation that we had before, which you weren't able to observe, but maybe with Con Ed coming in, a big part of the savings could be under the engineering and procurement, because if they want the job enough,
at the end of the
competitiveness of wanting to do the project.
You
don't think so?
No, they have a return on investment target that they're going that they have,
that was
have to hit.
Thank you.
But I think,
and it's not going to work if the cost of the supply power is 50, 60, or 70% higher to the utility. No utility is going to do it. No buyer of power. That's where I'm having this disconnect with your presentation, saying it's so much higher. I mean, these guys have these tax equity partners. A lot of them are hedge funds and other guys on Wall Street. They're pretty darn smart, and they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. And they, as I say, they have a return on investment target to hit, and they're not. They have to do it with the power being competitive into the grid versus what you guys charge or OUC charges or what FP&L generates. So. I guess I won't belabor the point. I'm just having difficulty with it.
No, it is bewildering. In fact, at our board meeting, everyone acknowledges we're not making a decision for solar based on economics. It's because customers want it. And if you combine the customer want with a community solar program where the customer pays the premium, but there's also the other advantage. It's a hedge against rising fuel prices, because the economics can work as fuel prices go up. And it's also a contribution in greenhouse gas emission reduction.
Can I ask you another question? On the next slide, you were
Mr.
talking
Tonko.
about some of the projects that have been.
Mr. Tonko,
Oh, I'm sorry.
can you come up to the microphone, please?
Sure.
Bob, you can sit at the table.
Please take your seat. I think you're.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt. So you went to the next slide, and you were that's talking about some of the current projects. Do you have the total installed cost for each of those projects?
I don't have, because these are PPAs, and they haven't shared the pricing of their PPA. Now, OUC came out in the press at $70 a megawatt hour, but we learned later that that was the cost from the solar developer. OUC then has to pay an improvement tax to Orange County, plus OUC did all of the interconnection work and contributed the land and the studies.
So those figures aren't easily available. I mean, in other words, I think simply looking to find a way to verify your projections, which some people are questioning the high cost.
Can I tell you the source of this?
Well, of course.
We commissioned Black & Veatch Engineering Corporation, stationed in Kansas City. And Black & Veatch is not only an EPC provider, but they're an engineering consulting services. FMPA is under the Florida Competitive Consultant Negotiation Act. We hired Black & Veatch a few years ago as one of our prime consultants that we use for power plant development.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the report's available if you'd like to see it.
Well, let me take this one step further. Do you have any way of estimating what the installed cost is, or was that just a shot in the dark on the projects that have been completed?
No,
I think.
no, because
okay.
third parties develop those.
No way to really validate them at this point.
To validate these numbers?
In relationship to your projections, right?
I would use these as a benchmark, and I would expect PPAs to come under.
Thank you.
So, can I ask a question, Michelle? So it seems to me the only reasonable way for a small entity like Vero Beach to finance a project like the one we're envisioning at the airport would be to have a third-party developer and to enter into a PPA that stipulated the price at or below market fuel costs, and that might float with that value. Is that at all reasonable? Is there a third-party developer that would even come close to such an agreement? Because we're small, we can't afford. Right. We don't have a way of diversifying our investments in power. Right. If we were to get into it, we're not in Orlando that might look at a 50 gigawatt power solar power project and say, fine, we're just going to blend that into our mix. Right. We can't do that. So, is it even reasonable to assume that a third-party developer might approach a project like this?
Well, let's just look at the last couple of years in development of solar projects in Florida. They've been through PPAs. But Florida has offered something forever, since the 80s. The investor-owned utilities are required by the Public Service Commission to offer what's called standard offer contracts, which means that any power plant developer could come in and build and interconnect with FPL or Duke and receive a price for their energy based on the cost that FPL or Duke avoid, which is pretty much the market at that hour. There haven't been any developments like that in Florida because developers aren't willing to take a standard offer contract, especially the last few years, because gas prices have been so low. So these are all PPAs. Again, each of these three utilities have coal resources. They see it's good public relations to also go green. That might be one of the motivating factors. JEA is developing, of the 31 megawatts that they're going to be adding, they're developing smaller systems spread throughout their service territory so it's visible to their customers. They are developing customer offerings so they can move forward with a community solar type of rate for interested customers.
Do you have any prices going back to on the PPAs? The cost per megawatt hour?
We could probably get, although, Dan, help me, it might be redacted by the developer.
Maybe. I'm Dan O'Hagan, Associate General Counsel for FMPA. The third-party developer may consider it confidential business information and may redact it, but it wouldn't hurt for us to request it.
I mean, that's the bottom line number. You can talk about installation costs and everything. What is it to the customer? Having those numbers any place for this presentation?
Well, FMP, no. And let me just explain to you that at our board meeting in a couple weeks, we're going to get approval from our board to proceed with a request for proposals for PPAs. Our intent is to issue a notice of RFP issuance in April and go out for a request for proposals in August. So we're going to do our own investigations on the cost of power purchase.
And is that information going to be in the public record, or is it going to be redacted?
Vero Beach, as an FMPA member, is actually invited to join in what we're calling our multi-member funded solar PV project.
Okay, but I'll ask the question again. Is it going to be in the public record? We've run into situations where things were viewed as confidential proprietary information, just like the gentleman brought up there. So I'm asking, is it going to be in the public record that everybody can see?
What I mentioned was that third-party developers were considering it confidential. FMPA wouldn't consider it confidential unless we're required to by the developer. So if the developer requires us to, actually if it's Florida statutes, requires us to keep it confidential because the developers marked it that, we will. But we have no intention to keep
because otherwise the study's worthless if people like us can't see the numbers.
No, absolutely. And as Michelle says, as a member, you're absolutely entitled to see those numbers.
Okay. Lakeland Electric at their airport. Lakeland Electric really has led the way in Florida. They entered into their PPA back in 2011 with SunEdison, and they're developing it in phases for a total of 24 megawatts. Here's OUC. They have an existing 6-megawatt facility at their Stanton Energy Center, and they're adding this other 11 megawatts also on property at the Stanton Energy Center.
Can I ask a question, City Manager? Is that part of the power to get supplied to us through our Stanton contracts?
No, sir, it's not unless it's a backup. But no, ours specifically toward the Stanton plants, Stanton and Stanton 2.
All right, thank you.
OUC is thinking of offering customer programs with this new solar development, but OUC really did show the way with their community solar program that they unleashed in 2014. What they developed solar PV panel on top of parking structures. And I was over there the other day and snapped this picture with my cell phone. This is what it looks like from the ground. This is it from the air. It's 400 kW install. That's DC. And they did advertise the availability of a community solar program on a billboard and sought customers to sign up, and they were oversubscribed in 48 hours.
And was that at a premium cost?
It was, but it was at a subsidized premium. OUC will state they're charging 13 cents. Their current rate is about 10 cents. They're charging 13 cents to their subscribers, and they'll say they're subsidizing about 5 cents. They currently have a waiting list. And their program works that there was a $50 deposit. Customers could sign up for up to the energy output of up to 15 kW block. After 2 years, the customers will get their deposit back. And if the customer moves within their service territory, they can keep their subscription. But one thing about community solar programs, just to note, it takes a lot of marketing effort and, again, billing system adjustments. So it's a costly program, but it's very doable, and customers love it.
Well, it sounded like a billboard was a pretty cheap marketing program.
Right.
But the trick is having the billing system set up so that you can
Right.
credit the customer, right? And I don't
Correct.
think we're up to snuff for that, or are we?
We are.
We can do that at this
Yeah,
point?
we have some customers that we purchase solar panels. We have one that we write a check.
No. I know that we have net metering, but if we had a community solar program where a customer virtually buys the solar power, in other words, they get credit on their bill for being part of the solar farm that's at the airport or something like that, are we set up to do that?
Yeah, the net metering billing would allow
Would take care of that?
But the key is there's not going to be that much credit. It's going to actually be a charge. So ours would be built in as a charge area. One utility where I worked, we had a flat charge. It was $5 a month if you signed on to renewable resources wherever TVA could get those renewable resources. That could be wind, solar, or wherever. And we were guaranteed that would be our package, and it was a upcharge to every customer over and above their typical bill.
Yeah, that's very similar to what FPL is doing. FPL is currently installing two 74.5 megawatt systems, and from what I understand, they've asked people to sign up at $9 a month. That's not a guarantee that you'll get enough customers signed up to fully cover your costs. There could be still some cross-subsidization. But yeah, you're right, Judy. The marketing could be relatively inexpensive, and then it's just a question of watching the program and keeping it fully subscribed. So that concludes my presentation. Again, I just wanted to give you an overview of what we learned as we launch out on an FMPA joint action solar PV project. And at this point, are there any other questions?
Well, I have a question. Back to your handout originally. Mm-hmm. From the numbers, I get how you're switching over from Figure 5 to Figure 6. Okay. For the cost to build a solar facility to then the FMPA cost. But I don't understand the relationship between Figure 6 and Figure 7.
Okay, great. So as Judy stated, Figure 5 is the cost built. Obviously, we would have to go to the bank to get a loan to build. Let's say we're building a 30-megawatt plant for $68 million. So the debt service on that loan is shown on Figure 6. There's also ongoing O&M costs. And again, the O&M costs estimate came from Black & Veatch. Again, on projects they're familiar with, of the typical cost of O&M. There's also a repair and replacement cost. The inverters last about 5 to 10 years, so you have to start accruing money for repair and replacement of major components. So we get a total annual cost, and then we're going to break that into a rate. And the rate denominator is the amount of megawatt AC installed. Then on Figure 7, I broke those costs up for you based on the expected production per megawatt hour. So Figure 7 relates the estimated solar energy costs per megawatt hour. And again, this has no investment tax credit, no subsidies, raw cost, benchmark only. And then you can go back to the components, and maybe you're talking with a PPA provider who has extra panels, so he won't charge you for all the panels. Or you're going to donate the land, so the land isn't there. So you can see how these rates could be used for benchmarking. Okay, Madam Chairman, thank you very much.
Okay. I just would like to ask the Vice Chair, and do you think we should make a formal request then for some of that additional information that you mentioned?
I think would be good, and also just getting an update on the study that's done and making sure that we see all the numbers, I think would be helpful.
Okay, well, I would like to do that then. Okay. Are you able to get that to us?
What I'll do is I'll make sure that Judy has the Black & Veatch report that we commissioned from September of 2015.
We'll send it to the Deputy City Clerk.
Thank you.
Okay.
We don't
Sherry,
violate the
I'll make
Florida
sure you
sunshine
get
law.
Thank you.
Okay.
But also, since we're just launching our request for proposals activity, we won't have responses to the RFP until third or fourth quarter of this year.
So, Michelle, was there some requirement for, I know that this originally came about because FMPA was looking for interested member organizations who might be interested in learning more or participating in a community solar project, and you needed some sort of indication of interest.
Right.
So do we have to, in order to stay in the loop, to learn about what you're doing on solar, do we have to make a formal indication of our interest, or have you got that now? Because we're asking lots of questions.
Well, I think this has been very helpful because it is it's good to hear the concerns and to hear the debate and to just kind of gel. But to get back to our project, so far we've solicited interest. We're up to about 17 megawatts of interest in a joint action project across 9 Florida municipal utilities that are FMPA members. This is going to be an iterative process, though, because even though that expression of interest is there, until costs can be seen and rates could be designed,
there's no commitment.
There's no commitment.
Right.
So we're going through this iterative process right now. The PPA, the RFP for the PPA is part of the discovery process to help us get to commitment in the September-October timeframe. But I think the interest will probably wax or wane depending on pricing.
Right.
But if we could still keep an interested party of 10 megawatts, I think that's great economy of scale for the participants. And you're right, Judy, we did this because some of our members wanted to get involved with community solar. The twist here is that it's probably a large central thing. It's not in the community. Right. But even experience around the country has shown that that doesn't matter. Customers don't need to see those blue panels in their backyard. So we think we still have a green light to go forward.
Would we be able to get copies of the RFP when they go out?
Definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the resolution, and I would like to review the history of it and also discuss new information that's come to light regarding this resolution. I think we all received it on Friday. But to review the history of it, and these are the minutes of the Utilities Commission meeting from February 9th, and this is Commissioner Orcutt's discussion of it. This is on page 7. At this point in time, FPL's discussion with St. John's Water Management District is not really addressing the requirement to have FPL utilize the surface water. Therefore, she felt it would be important for the Utilities Commission to request that St. John's Water Management District consider or require FPL to use surface water if it becomes available. That's the history of it. We received information from Mr. Bolton, on Friday, and that is a memorandum. The title is Agenda Request for Governing Board Meeting, and this is from Rick Berklew, Bureau Chief, and that Bureau is the Bureau of Water Use Regulation. The subject is the power plant citing Florida Power and Light. And by the way, I made copies just of a few sheets, so if anyone needs it, I'm going to pass this in both directions because I intend to refer to specific paragraphs in here. Because I think with regard to this new information, in my opinion, the resolution, the timing is inappropriate. The context is misleading in that it does not acknowledge existing documents and dictates of the Bureau. And there is nothing in the resolution that has not already been cited by higher authorities. I'm going to go through that now. But in addition to that, my concern is it also could give an appearance of impropriety in that the Groveland Reservoir is not public and is in fact a property of Evans Utilities, and we can go into that as well. But first, let's go to the information that Mr. Bolton provided to us. And the areas of it that I would like to cite, on page 1, the recommendation, that's the very first item. It says, and again, this is the Bureau of Water Use Regulation, and it's from the Bureau Chief. The recommendation is approval of the agency report and conditions regarding the site certification application for the Florida Power and Light Okeechobee Clean Energy Center. So they are recommending it. And again, this is the Bureau of Water Use Regulation. If you go to, the next page that I gave you, which in the larger packet is packet page 28, and I'm looking at the title, Surface Water Sources. It mentions the Fort Drum Marsh Conservation Area and Blue Cypress Lake, which would not meet, and you'll see in the second paragraph there, it says that they are regulated water bodies requiring operational flow rates and criteria to meet environmental needs. Neither source is capable of providing a reliable or adequate quantity of water for the operation of this plant. Now, the entire next paragraph is about the Groveland Reservoir, and it says it is currently in the conceptual evaluation phase, and there are a number of environmental, financial, technical, and regulatory issues requiring resolution before this project, Groveland, would become available to potential users. FPL's investigation indicated that if all of the foregoing issues are resolved, the design and construction of the Groveland Reservoir would occur in 5 to 6 years, after which water may be available for use at the plant. As a condition of certification and upon notification by the district of a potential alternative source, FPL will be required, so they're going to be required, to evaluate and report to the district regarding the potential use of any identified source. If deemed feasible, the licensee will be required to propose a plan to maximize the use of these alternative sources. It is anticipated that the district will request investigation of the use of Groveland Reserve within the first 6 years after leasing. And the final item, again, this actually is the closing page of the packet. It's packet page 34. The final, and again, the title is recommendation. It's closing with a recommendation, and that recommendation is that the district has reviewed the site certification application for the plant pursuant to the above described requirements, of which there were many, and is recommending approval of the site certification application with the conditions listed below. And you will note that the conditions listed below are conditions recommended by the St. Johns River Water Management District, and there are many of those. I didn't make a copy of the entire report, but we all have it. And you might also note that they happen to be meeting today, March 8th. So this is occurring today. I don't know the time of the meeting, but perhaps as we speak. So within this context, the resolution that we have, or we had drawn up, doesn't cite any of this and would seem to be, as I said, inappropriate in timing and misleading in that it does not acknowledge any of these documents.
Excuse me, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Do you have the new resolution in front of you?
Yes.
Okay.
And I also would like to state that, Groveland is, the resolution gives the impression that Groveland is not a company, so to speak, if you read it. It's not stating anywhere that it is. And, I think that that's inappropriate and misleading. I think it should be stated that it is a company. And I'll pass that information out as well. And we can review that.
Can you hear me? Are you indicating that the resolution, although perhaps incomplete and unsatisfactory at this point, is something that could or should be reworded, adjusted to reflect your concerns and views?
Yes, I think that the timing, and other members, of course, we will comment on this, but I think that the timing is inappropriate. It's occurring today, and we're not suggesting anything new. This has already been addressed by a higher authority than ourselves. So unless we think we know more than the Bureau of Water Use and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, I think, I'm not sure why we would want to be directing them. I think it seems inappropriate. And also, as I said, I was surprised, actually, and I got this from the internet, and I'll refer now to Groveland Utilities, and they did a financial feasibility study of the Groveland Reservoir and stormwater area, and this was in 2014. And if you go to page 4. Let's see. Okay. Yes, it's a little bit hard to read their page numbers, but it's page ES4, and I'm referring to the feasibility study. And the heading here is Other Potential Beneficiaries. This is the first paragraph, the last sentence. Another potential beneficiary is FPL. In the event that it chooses to site a new power plant in northeast Okeechobee County, water from the Groveland Reservoir project could be used for power plant cooling. And they are listed again at the bottom of this laundry list of other so-called beneficiaries, which, I assume in this case would be a customer. I don't think that, this is gratis. And on the following page, the second paragraph, the last sentence, it says the annual revenues and costs were calculated each year from 2015, the presumed year when project design begins, to the year 2020 when the project becomes operational. So this project will not become operational until 2020. So we're writing a resolution, in effect, directing two companies about something that really already has been addressed by a higher authority, more than one, and will not occur until 2020.
Okay, Madam Chairman, I guess I took a little bit different view on it. I accept your point that this is a project that's going to take quite a while to work its way out, but I thought we were just sort of putting a marker on the table saying that all other things equal, we would prefer to have water drawn from surface water drawn from a farm rather than hitting the aquifer, and that if I understand it correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it might even lessen the flow into the Indian River a little bit. And that's all that we were attempting to do, was just saying this is something, all other things equal, we would have a preference for.
Yes, I think, our purpose as a utility commission should be looking out for the City of Vero Beach's utilities, which includes our potable water. And so we also draw from that same straw, in the same pond of the Florida aquifer. And so the purpose of this resolution, the second resolution, was to support the St. John's Water Management District's recommendations to Florida Power and Light, and also to support Groveland Utilities' efforts to build this reservoir and stormwater treatment facility, which is going to take funding, and so to support that concept as being positive to help protect our water supply. And I would prefer to take it one step further, which the resolution didn't do, but would be to call on Florida Power and Light to, and it won't be in the resolution, but personally, I think that they have very strong corporate ethic to operate all their facilities in an environmentally sound manner and to conserve natural resources and to engage the stakeholders to build trust for environmental protection. This is stated so clearly in their corporate mission. Then I would think it would behoove them to work with Groveland Utility now, so that as the planning process occurs for both the power plant and the Groveland utility reservoir and stormwater treatment area, it's done efficiently and cost effectively by working together from now to the future, so that 9 million gallons a day per water coming out of the aquifer per day is significant. And so if Florida Power and Light waits until the whole reservoir is constructed to even begin their feasibility, then that delays the process significantly. And so I would urge Florida Power and Light, and thank you for being here today, I would urge you to start working now with Groveland Utilities so that it expedites the whole process to save that aquifer water. But this resolution before you doesn't go that far. It simply supports the St. John's efforts to encourage Florida Power and Light within the statutes that they're able to do. They're confined by statute. And
well, it doesn't say encourage, it says requires. That's my version, if I'm looking at the right version. The City Council hereby urges and requests the St. Johns River Water Management, this is Section 3, through its CUP process to require Florida Power and Light to utilize water from the Groveland Reservoir. That's requiring one company to utilize water from another company. And if that's what we're doing, if we want to dictate how one company does business with another, then I think we should state it as such. And don't use Groveland Reservoir. Give the name of the company. It's Groveland Utilities, LLC, and we're requiring one company to do business with another. And maybe they're already doing it. And by the way, if Florida Power and Light would like to comment on this, any of this, then I invite you to the microphone.
Isn't the resolution we're discussing a different one?
yeah, I think so. I think you're working off of the wrong resolution.
This is 6B. Are we on 6B?
That's the old one.
Okay. Can I have?
Which I agree
one
with.
was sent out on
I
Friday.
agree with
handed
the
that one
chair
to
on the
you.
old one, but as I understand, there's a updated resolution that is
How
quite
many
different.
were there in total? 6B.
That's the one I handed you this morning that was sent out on Friday.
Okay. But I mean, how many were there? There were so many versions of this.
No, there were only 2.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Bart Getchins. I'm the Area External Affairs Manager. And in regards to alternate water use, it's not that this would be precedent setting. In West Palm Beach, we have a West Energy Center that we initially started pulling from below the aquifer. The Avon Park area was our primary source of water. When the county was prepared to provide the reclaimed water to us, we are now using that reclaimed water. And right now, we are looking at all alternatives, including Groveland, and we have been in contact and we have been in negotiation with them to see what their future plans are.
In my absence over the last year, I'm catching up to speed in some of these issues. Can you quickly tell me where this initiative has come from? Where did it go from where to here, and what's been the
You mean where did the resolution come from?
The rationale for this has come from what? From the city council, from city management, from FP&L?
No, I don't think so. I think this is like a citizens' initiative to be concerned about the amount of water that's going to be withdrawn from the aquifer. The county is concerned about it. And they have other issues they have to be concerned about because ingress and egress will be through Indian River County, and so they have issues with emergency services and traffic impact and so forth. But there are a lot of people who are concerned about the amount of water that's being withdrawn. 9 to 11 million gallons a day is about the equivalent of what the entire county uses.
Thank you.
Or probably more than the entire county uses.
And if I might add, we're using 9 to 11 million gallons per day, and we're putting 80% of it back in. Deep well injection.
Polluted.
Well, not necessarily polluted, but more or less expended.
But polluted. It'll be so laden with materials that it has to be put into the boulder zone where it won't ever be part of the water system.
I'd have to refer to one of our environmentalists, but I don't really think the term polluted applies
is
in
not
this
is too
case.
strong. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I never heard the term expend it when it comes to water. Can you explain that?
We use the water, we run it through 5 times. When the water comes out, and I'll allow one of our experts to come up here and explain it a little better than I can.
Okay.
Spare you. My name is Michael Tamara. I'm an environmental attorney with Florida Power and Light, and this is my project. I'm going to play engineer for a few minutes to spare you the calculations, but and if I get in trouble, then our engineer will come up. Basically, there are 2 things operating here that you sort of touched on. The first is a legal requirement from the St. Johns River Water Management District that Florida Power and Light use the lowest quality water that it could possibly use for the intended use. The second big issue that's going on is the requirement to use an alternative water source when it becomes economically, environmentally, and technically feasible. So as was described, we have a situation with our West County Energy Center where we are now using 100% reclaim, where the plant was initially built using groundwater. That becomes a requirement. It's a law. It's the same condition the county has in its consumptive use permit. And that's why the county is getting some pressure to look for alternative water sources. So we have the same thing. We just licensed 2 new nuclear plants in Turkey Point and Miami-Dade County, where we're using 80 million gallons a day, 80 to 90 million gallons a day of reclaimed water, solving this Miami-Dade County's reclaim problem, which prior to that time was being deposited into the Atlantic Ocean and being deep welled. In this case, what we're doing with our water supply after almost a year with St. John's, insisting that we use the lowest quality water that we can, we are installing a series of wells deep into the saline portion of the Floridan and testing those to see how much water we can get from the Avon Park producing zone, which lies below the Floridan. If we can get a lot of the water from the Avon Park, we will then abandon a Floridan well and install a deeper well into Avon Park. And we will do that continuously until we have maximized the usability of the water in a conservation sense, meaning we are requiring the lowest quality of water that we can, still cycle it 5 times, still 5 cycles of concentration, at which point it will no longer be usable, and the remaining that what can't be used will be injected into the boulder zone. Bart actually had the numbers backwards. 80% of it is lost through evaporation, which then falls as rain into the hydrologic cycle. It remains in the hydrologic cycle. 20%.
So that's the expended part.
20%.
Okay.
It cycles up so much that the natural constituents. It already starts out as saline. In fact, there'll be times, if we're lucky, with our program of producing new wells putting new wells, replacement wells, at the cost of millions of dollars to replace a well, into the APPZ, the Avon Park Producing Zone, we'll be using actually brackish water. So the sense that this is drinking water, sometimes, it's Florida aquifer, but as you go deep, how deep are we? 300, 400 feet? 400, 4?
The Avon Park would be around
1,000 feet. So, we're all on the same page here. Look, we're in the company. We are, as was alluded to, we have a corporate ethic and an incentive to do this. We will spend more money sometimes than it would not, make something the cheapest source. Our Dade County, it's costing us $1 billion, frankly, to use reclaimed water in Dade County.
Question.
Pardon me?
I have a question for you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Educational question. You cycle it 5 times, you say, and
yes.
It becomes unusable?
It's cooling towers, yeah.
What have you done to the water to make it unusable?
Evaporation. It starts out with certain constituents that are natural in the groundwater. As it evaporates through the cooling towers, it's cooled by the use of cooling towers. It becomes more and more concentrated. It'd be like if you just let a pail of water sit out. At the end, and evaporate. By the end, it would get to the point where everything that was in the big pail is now concentrated in smaller amounts of water. And then when it gets to that point, it's so concentrated with constituents that it fouls the machinery.
Could you call them pollutants to the water?
No, they're naturally occurring things in the water. You can call what's in the water pollutants, but
but you can't use it anymore, so you're putting it back into the a deep aquifer, but an aquifer.
Yes,
right?
after it's cycled 5 times.
Okay.
And the concentrations get to the point where we can't use it in the cooling towers anymore. It's just fouling the machinery.
But is that water usable for anything by anyone?
No, that's what goes to the boulder zone after that.
So you start with brackish and you end up with brine.
You start with sort of, in that sense, you end up with something that I'm trying to think of an analogy in another context. But it's just the concentrations get so constituent. It's like you get salt ponds, where water sits out and evaporates from the sun. That water gets so salty, essentially, so salty that it has to be deep well.
And aren't there some additional chemicals added to the water?
They use scalants and things like that. Right. But it's.
I'm sorry.
All right. So I wanted to answer the question just simply about the hydrologic cycle and to lay the groundwork for the thinking process. We will go through a process over the years looking at alternative sources, and when they become available, we're required to use them, and that's a typical water management district requirement.
I have a question.
Yes.
So what would be the barriers to using surface water?
Well, typically, you need now.
Well, assuming there's a lot of surface water available to you, what would be FP&L's economic or environmental concerns?
It's really with surface water. Often it's availability. If you use surface water and it's not available all year round, then you need a completely redundant backup system. So otherwise, you don't have electricity every time there's no water. So with a lot of the water sources, what you have is, Florida, we have too much water in times of the year and not enough water in other times of the year. And the time of year when you have too much water, no one needs it.
And
the other thing is reservoirs. Our Martin County facility has a reservoir. We use surface water there. It's 5,000 acres. You know how big it is? It's 10,000 acres, something like that. So that's that.
So that works fine for that plant, the Martin County plant, to use surface water?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because someone had mentioned that there may be an issue with the temperature of the water, that when it comes out of the ground it's cooler, and so therefore FP&L may not be in favor of using it because of it would not be as cool for cooling purposes.
We are having trouble with our reservoir, essentially a reservoir at Turkey Point for the existing units. Turkey Point is 3 and 4. The reservoir water is becoming too hot and too salty. And it's not so much last year, it was over 100 degrees, and the plants can't, we have safety issues with that. But I think I think in modern, we don't have cooling towers there. So surface water is not an unusable source.
But you would need to engineer cooling towers into your plan?
We have cooling towers for the new plant.
Okay.
So we could, when surface water, let me put it this way, there's no impediment when surface water becomes available and it's technically, economically, and environmentally feasible to do it. We are required by law to do it the same way that any other water user that gets a permit from the water management.
And then my understanding also is that you already own a utility right-of-way between the property and your property, because the power lines run through there?
I don't know
That's
about
not your
that.
area.
You're thinking about for maybe like a long
where you would
pipeline
do a pipe.
Well, yeah, we could do a pipe. We have power eminent domain. We could condemn land for a pipe if we needed this. The point is that it's a feasibility study that will be undertaken. At this point in time, the district is requiring us to do it. Indian River County has asked and received permission to be in by the Water Management District to be in the loop. They will be notified. There's no impediment to using Groveland now, or any other water source. So if Groveland comes to us in 5 years and says, here's the source of water, here's the cost, here's what we would charge for it, we would factor that into the economic model. Now, we'll tell you, with most of our situations with reclaimed, we don't pay for the water. We build the pipeline, and we take care of the infrastructure for the delivery. The county, Miami-Dade County, is required to treat it. We do some polishing back at the new plant. In Palm Beach County is a consortium of utilities, not just Palm Beach, but a number of utilities have all gotten together because there's some incentive for them. We're solving their consumptive use requirements to do something with reclaim. There's only so many golf courses you can put it on, right? So here we are now using it for an industrial use. So there's a working relationship with the government there. There is some risk associated with it right now. Palm Beach County Utilities is having some delivery problems. When they have delivery problems, we don't get the water, we have to shut down the plants. That's never a good thing, particularly in the summer. Dade County, we're solving that problem. We learn with each one. Dade County, we're solving that problem. If they have delivery problems, we have the right to go in and fix whatever it is and charge back the county because we can't afford to shut down. At that point, it'd probably be 3 plants, one fossil plant, 2 nuclear plants. And it's hot there in the summer. All right. Did I get in any trouble, or was I good?
I have a quick question for you. Is this statement factual? Florida Power & Light is requested to withdraw an estimated 9 million gallons of raw public water per day from the Florida aquifer for use in the production of electric power. Is that a factual statement?
It's not quite factual. The request is for 9 million gallons a day. Raw water, I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means either. That's why
the water.
I asked the question.
The water we are withdrawing is the chlorides. Our concentrations will be the wells where the way the current setup is with the first set of 5 wells will be 5 wells, 6. The first set of 6 wells will withdraw 57% from the Avon Park, or is it higher?
No, that's what our modeling
Yeah, 57% from the Avon Park producing zone, not the Florida, just because of the location at the interface. The water is saline. It's saline in character based upon the amount of chlorides. Once we get more into the, brackish is, of course, more salty than saline. So when we get into the brackish, which is 10,000 milligrams per liter chlorides, right? Who's in, I don't know. I think brackish is 10,000 milligrams per liter chlorides. So those, you should know that. No. That's where we're probably withdrawing mostly. Now, what happens is...
Mr. Bolton is here, and he knows the answer to that.
Yeah, what's that?
Now, the 10,000 milligrams per liter is where you are below the drinking water aquifer. So that's where you're going to be in.
No, it's the district's definition of... the Water Management District's definition of they have fresh, saline, and brackish.
Yeah, but I think if you're in the EPZ, you're going to be not 10,000.
No. Well, it could get, no?
Yeah, you're going to be probably about...
I'm wrong. Actually, I'm wrong. 10,000 is the definition of salt water. Brackish. But in any event, we're...
U.S. drinking water.
Yeah, well, that's a definition of salt water.
Since Mr. Bolton is in the conversation, maybe he can explain what was intended when they put raw public water in their definition. If you're disagreeing with that definition of the water...
The definition of raw public water is a district terminology, so that when they're dealing with CUPs or consumptive use permits that cities, counties, everybody gets, it defines 2 things. Usually when you're talking about the Florida aquifer, you're going to have 2 terms. One is the raw water that you're going to be pulling out. The next is finished water. So when I produce water and I sell it to the public, it's a finished water product. So to define those terminologies so that nobody gets confused, they use the term raw because that's the raw source you're going to have. And therefore, when we talk about the city's consumptive use permit, if it's 12 million gallons a day, that's the withdrawal from the aquifer. That's not what we finish and we produce out to the public. And that's what the terminology was for, so that somebody couldn't come back and say that, no, that was the finished water. I meant the finished water of 9 million gallons a day. Therefore, if you have 20% waste or something, you would have been in 11 million gallons a day of raw withdrawal. So that should clear that up. The other is the U.S. drinking water level is 10,000. Is anything above that's considered drinking water? Anything below that, yes, he's right, it's considered salt water.
Then I'd like to ask this gentleman, he disagreed with that earlier, with that definition. Do you still disagree that this is a improper term?
I don't know. Can you read it to me? I don't know. We're parsing some words here. If you could read it back to me again. It's 9 million gallons a day. That number is correct.
Withdraw an estimated 9 million gallons of raw public water per day from the Florida aquifer for use in the production of electric power at its proposed Okeechobee Clean Energy Center.
Yeah, I would say raw, if that's definition. It's unfinished. Public, I don't know what that means. It's groundwater. Groundwater is held in trust for uses that are beneficial, reasonable beneficial.
I just want to make sure
utility.
we didn't get hung up on words here.
No, but that number is correct. The 9 million gallons a day, and as I say, it's cycled 5 times, and 80% of that is evaporated, comes back as rain, and 20% of the 9 million gallons will be deep well injected, like an RO plant would, reject its reject water. If that's all you have.
The chemicals that you use to treat the water so it doesn't damage the equipment, what's the maximum concentration going to be when you re-inject it? And what are the...
I can't go there. We'll have to, maybe...
Okay. And what are the chemicals themselves? Are they... inert?
No hazardous. It's scalants, things that keep the water from corroding the machinery and whatnot, which allows us to use. We could use less of that. We use more water. So, it's just. Can you address that?
And if I could ask a quick question before the engineer gets up there, have you had a chance to review the latest resolution?
I don't know if I've seen the latest. I too was sort of caught between the variations. So I don't. I think frankly, we.
I'll be happy to answer that.
Okay.
Because I can't speak for you, but I do know at least 2 representatives from FP&L saw the finished product on Friday.
And did they have a comment?
Yes, they had no objection.
Yeah, I don't think we actually have any huge concerns because I don't think it really says anything. We're just really here to try to get you comfortable to some degree with what we're actually doing because we do have these requirements that everyone's sort of encouraging us to comply with are really something we do. We don't. We think in terms of the resolution, to the extent it ties us to or suggests that we agree to get into a particular business arrangement in the future, either as a regulatory requirement or as a promise to the Commission. Somehow it's perceived as a promise to the Commission. Our credibility is important. We don't want to. We just want to be clear that we will evaluate, but we're not making any commitments to a particular project or business at this time.
Do you see yourself, you're listed as a beneficiary in this financial feasibility study by Groveland Utilities, LLC. Does FPL see itself as a beneficiary of this project?
Everyone that's doing these kind of projects, and this isn't the first time we've sort of seen this movie. There are similar water farming projects that people are proposing. They do see the utility as being deep pocket, so to speak, as a participant for our water needs, and we try to shy away from that. I wouldn't say we're a beneficiary in any financial sense. I think because in the end, look, the ratepayers pay whatever the cost of water is. It's the ratepayers pay. Let's just say that, So it's not FPL pays. It goes into the rates, and we recover that. So. I don't know what their intent was, and I don't want to, parse on that. But we're not. I would not say that we're not a financial partner, and we don't perceive ourselves as a beneficiary for a project that hasn't materialized. Ultimately, someday, maybe it could be a benefit. It could provide, water at a reasonable cost that would allow us to reduce the amount of groundwater.
Well, is it fair to say then you might be a potential customer in 2020?
Could potentially be a customer. That's right.
When it comes to fruition.
Yeah, we could potentially be a customer. That's correct. So.
But again, you would have to go through all the regulatory permits and process with the St. John's and everybody else to get to that end process of even utilizing those waters.
Yes, we would modify our permits to go through a different scenario.
So it'd be nothing more than your everyday normal procedure of business to get to the end result of producing a cost-effective product, i.e. electricity, to the customer
right,
base.
And that, yes, exactly. And that's what I'm saying, that I want to get everybody comfortable. It is the normal. Switching to an alternative water source when it becomes economically, technically, and environmentally feasible is the normal course of business. And our history has been that that's been the normal course of business. So we switched, like I say, West County Energy Center. We were in groundwater, then surface water, reservoir that's adjacent, combination of ground and surface water. When reclaimed water became available, West County is situated right next to a mine. There's all these old mining pits, which, through some miracle of geology in South Florida, actually hold water, and it doesn't all leak out. We used some surface water. We used groundwater, but when reclaim became available, we reached a deal with the 5 municipalities and the county that put all their water together, and boom, so it works, and it is the normal course of business that we will switch over, and the district does a very good job. I'm sure. They're always pestering, not only us, but the utilities, with their reclaimed water uses requirements. And, why do you have to use fresh water to irrigate? Why can't you use the reclaimed? And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Like I say, the local government's they don't have, there's only so much irrigation you could do. So you do the best you can, and that's all FPL does. We do the best we can. But we have that ethic, that water ethic that allows us to switch over. So, if you're done with me, I'll be glad to let you get on with your agenda.
So I would still like to see the resolution move forward just to show support to St. John's and support for the Groveland project.
Are there any other comments? Does anyone else have anything further to say? I'll just say for myself, I'm glad to see that in the latest version that requirement that companies do business with each other has been removed. I thought that was inappropriate. And I think that the current version is greatly improved. Would anyone else like to make a comment?
Curiosity question. The first version was derived, or the verbiage was written by
staff.
Yes. Let's put it in the timeline, and I think, as the chairman said, it came up as a notation to the Utility Commission that we're going to proceed and look at this project, and one of the Utility Commission members did that. And so we tried to put together a resolution that reflected what we thought was discussed at the Utility Commission meeting. Then we made sure that what I refer to as our partners, Florida Power and Light and St. John's Water Management District, in this effort to see if we were all on the same page. Is this what we're thinking, where we're going? And Rob has spent extensive time with the St. John's Water Management District. He's also spent a lot of time with Florida Power and Light representatives, as well as myself, in trying to get a scope. Where is it that we play a role in this? And I think, as Judy just indicated, our role, we don't really have a role. Florida Power and Light's doing everything within the ethics as well as the law to conform to what siting that they're doing. That there's no question about that. And so what we're saying is that we are aware of the project, and we were putting in our notice that says, hey, we agree that the process has taken place. It has been above board and all that good stuff, and we agree with the findings at the outcome of the St. John's Water Management District. The first one was much more restrictive, and we were taking a much harder position. And there was some question on our part, is that really the role of the city of Vero Beach? Now, the county has a different role than we do, but our role is very limited. First of all, it'd be 20 years before it would have any impact, if in fact it ever had any impact on our water supply. So it's really more for the benefit of the entire state of Florida in what we're doing. So we're just sort of in a position to say, hey, we think this process has been fair, equitable, and we agree with the findings of the St. John's Water Management District. I think Florida Power and Light's had input in that, as well as other agencies. The ultimate decider, is my understanding, is the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So it's in the stages and progressing forward in their exercise.
Thank you. I had several issues with the original resolution, feeling it had overstepped many boundaries and was regulating FPL to do certain things. In light of the rewrite of the resolution, I'd make a motion to move that forward. I don't believe that it does anything other than what Florida Power and Light would have to do in its regulatory process. And I think that we're just supporting the fact of that process.
I agree, and I would second it.
Before we get to the
we
resolution,
do need public comment.
Well, I would.
Questions answered.
I'm waiting for an answer from the engineer about the chemicals that are
I'm
being
so sorry.
re-injected.
Yes, please. Let's have that
all
answer.
want an answer.
Hi, I'm Bill Flippin with FPL and the Engineering Construction Group, a.k.a. the engineer. So I think your question, yeah, right. I'm in a box now.
You're a real engineer, not an engineering attorney, right?
Yes, I'm an engineer by trade, a chemical engineer. As far as the chemicals that would be in the water, I think as Mike mentioned before, we would have anti-scalants, we would have acid addition, other things to try to treat the water to prevent scaling in our cooling tower and condenser, our heat transfer equipment. As we cycle 5 times, the raw water that comes out of the wells, out of the aquifer, ultimately gets cycled up to a point where we will have the potential for scaling. So we have to inject that water. Now the injection permit, which we haven't received yet, but it will be similar to what we have at West County and West Palm Beach, is an injection well. It's non-hazardous material, so no hazardous material will be injected. And then other than that, it's basically just contains cycled up constituents, calcium, magnesium, silicate, things like that. There'll be very trace quantities of any additions that we put into the water, as most of that will stay in the circulating water system itself between our cooling tower and condenser.
Okay. Thank you.
Did we find out what the anti-scalants are?
Oh.
What the compounds are?
Well, they're proprietary. I mean, they're commercial anti-scalants. I can follow up on that. I don't know the commercial name.
I can find that out, too.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Are you satisfied?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to call them for public comment before we vote.
Before we go to public comment, I have
Do you have another question?
No, I want to pursue this. You had a concern on page 3. As I understand it, the only concern you have is to require a FNL to use this.
That would have been in the original motion. The new resolution does not have that.
Oh, it does not? Okay.
Does not.
So
And that I would have had issue with that as well. The new one.
As did I, but that's not in there anymore. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The word requirement is not in there. We're not requiring anything.
Right. Let me apologize for having 2 of these resolutions, but there is a time frame that we were working with that if we were going to get our word in to anyone that really cared, we were sort of in a time restriction in order to get resolutions done. And typical, we'll do one, we'll float it around, and people like me object and that kind of stuff, and then we draw that back in, and then we go and do the second. We probably should have never put out the first resolution. That was an error. You notice that you were not required to vote on that one at all. So the one that you received, and unfortunately you did get it Friday, I believe, which only gave you a couple of days to review it, and then you got another copy, Sherry, as I understand, today.
Right. I have hard copies for anyone that didn't have it.
Yeah. So if you can refer to the update, is the one that we're really referring to, and it does not have the mandatory.
Jim,
I believe I have it.
Oh, I'm sorry. How widespread is this initiative, and is this something that all of the jurisdictions in the state or cities? I mean, I'm trying to get quickly a better feel for our position in relationship to other jurisdictions and why this is so important at this time. I mean, I'm catching up. I'm getting up to speed. It seems to me to be a little premature, but help me.
Rock, as usual, Vero Beach probably stands out on this as a municipality, although there are other municipalities, and I'm sure in Okeechobee County, they're probably weighing in some form or fashion. The counties are really the ones that are being impacted, i.e. Indian River County will have some type of resolution they'll send forward, but they also have not only the water issue, but they also have the egress issues as to how this is going to affect Indian River County. It's going to be located in Okeechobee County, but it still has their transportation. So they have other issues that are in there. In our respect, it was just that it was just to make our comments known is the only thing. The impact, and really as a standing entity, we probably have very, very little standing in this process.
And as I understand, FPL has reviewed it and they don't have issue with it.
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, when we were drawing it up and we had what I guess is the final document that's in front of you, we did send it over to two counterparts from myself and from Rob, and so they were able to review it, and we got comments on them from the first document as we had the iterations of the documents. So they were part of our discussion, as well as St. John's. Rob was in conversation with St. John's on extensive conversations with them and their staff.
Since there's been additional information, I'll ask again if there's any public comment. Thank you, Jim. Seeing none, I think we have a motion on the floor to approve, which I've seconded. So we'll take a vote.
Mr. Baczynski?
Aye.
Mrs. Moss?
Yes.
Mr. Teston?
Yes.
Mr. LaPointe?
Yes.
Mrs. Orcutt?
Yes.
Mr. Meckling?
Yes.
Mr. Otwater?
Yes.
Passes 7-0.
Then we move to Chairman's Matters. I have just one thing to report, and that is I attended the City Council meeting last week where the stormwater utility was discussed. And as you know, we voted to go forward with the preliminary study. But we did not vote on a methodology for that study. We voted only that was at the joint meeting with the Finance Commission, as you may recall. The City Council, I checked last night to see if the minutes were available, but they're not yet. But as I said, I attended, and City Council voted to continue the stormwater utility study 3-2. After that vote, there was an amendment, which I think was voted unanimously, and that amendment was to limit the study to option 1. You might recall that during that discussion, I think option 1B was the one that was suggested by Collective Water Resources. We did not recommend an option, but it's my understanding that the City Council felt that restricting it to, and that's option 1A and 1B, would rein in the cost of the study. And please correct me, Mr. O'Connor, if that's not what happened.
That is correct, to try to refine, because at this point they're going to be doing a lot of modeling and stuff, and we wanted to make sure that we sort of give a limitation, because if the modeling gets much larger, then there's a price to pay for that. But you're right, the City Council said this appears to be the two options that we want to be under consideration.
Yes, and that will be coming back to us. I need to research the idea that there is a public referendum. You may recall that I had requested that be attached to our recommendation. when I attended the city council meeting, it was not clear on the part of the city council that there would be a public referendum. So I personally think that we don't need to discuss this now, but I think that the public should be the final decision maker on a stormwater utility, and I think that's really important. But at any rate, I just wanted to get back to you on the progress of what we had discussed at our last official meeting, and we can move now to, and to thank you very much for electing me the chairwoman of this fine commission. And now we'll move to members' matters, and I think, Mr. Baczynski, we all received your materials. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairman, the purpose of bringing this up is basically partly to reassure ourselves and our citizens that our utility system is doing everything necessary to protect the quality of the water that people are drinking. The question that's come up is that apparently the EPA has changed and the specifications for collecting samples of water for testing, and for some reason a large number, possibly the majority, of water utilities have been ignoring that recommendation. And as a result, they are using a sampling method that minimizes the concentration of potentially toxic materials in the water samples that they use for testing. And I wanted to be sure that we were all aware of that, and that our water supply was being tested properly to ensure that we are getting a true measure of whatever toxins there might be.
Thank you very much. It's very timely. I mean, we spent a lot of time discussing something that will happen in 2020, and this is the here and now, and we really appreciate that.
And we have some very nasty examples of what can happen when you don't test properly.
Yes. Thank you.
So, is this the question you'd like to ask Mr. Bolton as to whether we fall into that category of testing or not?
That's why I included him in the distribution, and I'm pretty sure he has something to say on that matter.
I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to look at it. What was the information that you had forwarded on? Was
basically, it was the fact that the EPA has recommended a certain procedure for testing water to ensure that the concentrations of potential toxins are the maximum, as opposed to what many utilities are doing, which is to test in a way that dilutes those toxins when they test the water.
I believe that what they were doing is they're flushing the lines before they make the test, thereby minimizing the pollutants that are in the lines. My question would be, is our testing procedure as such where we flush the lines before we test, or do we leave the lines as the water is delivered to the customer?
Well, that's the question. And the other question really is that apparently the testing should be done at the customer's faucet.
Yeah.
I don't know what percentage of customers are contacted to perform those tests or to take those samples. And is that the only place where we take samples, or are there others?
Yeah, we just went through our lead testing, so I don't think we're required for now another 3 years. And it's a burden on us to do it, because you have to get residents to commit to doing the testing. So and we've had the same people doing it for years, and a lot of them finally get annoyed with it and say that because we have to drop the bottles off at a prior time, they have to do follow the procedures of running the water out of their faucet for X amount of seconds or minutes, and then taking the sample and then getting the sample to us, and then we collect them. But that's how we do it. We do it right in the resident's home. The problem that you have with lead is most of the time is caused because of the resident's home. Mm-hmm. So in the case of Vero Beach, we don't have any, unlike Flint, we don't have any lead pipes in our system. We don't have any lead services in our system. So where you run into problem, and where Flint ran into problem, was they changed their water source that led to, and whoever was in charge at the time didn't look at the new water source and how aggressive the water was going to be. So in their case, the water became more aggressive. It ate away at the scaling that was on the pipes and exposed, in their case, some of the lead pipes and lead services to now lead getting into the water supply. The other source that you have common, which is probably more Florida systems, run into problems with brass. So now if you look at all new brass that's put in, the brass itself is lead-free. So when you go out and buy, it says right on there, lead-free brass. So if you have an aggressive water, the brass actually gets into the water supply, or the lead in the brass gets into the water supply. Mm-hmm. And therefore, where we test is in the person's home. Mm-hmm. If you're testing at a fire hydrant before it ever gets in contact with brass or anything like that, mm-hmm. it's going to say there's no lead in the water. Mm-hmm. If you test coming out of our plant, there's no lead in the water. The lead comes from the systems that it interacts with to get to your faucet for you to drink. Mm-hmm. And therefore, that's what we test, is at your drinking water source. Mm-hmm. We really haven't had any issues with lead. We monitor our aggressive index, so we call it our AI. So it's a function of actually how hard the water is. The pH of the water are really the two basic factors that go into it. And we target a range. And as part of this whole RO plant expansion, our water is going to change. So therefore, when we went through this whole process, that's why it's taken such a long time, is we wanted to make sure that the water quality that we're putting out as far as an aggressive index is the same as what we've been putting out for years, so that we don't have any problems with when we go to more reverse osmosis.
Did I understand you said that you go to the same houses year after year?
Every 3 years, we first initially try to use the same people, but a lot of them will say, no, we don't want it. So then we'll send letters out, we'll contact people.
But statistically, won't you want to randomize the test? That would seem to be a hell of a lot more accurate.
You want to randomize the test throughout your service area.
Right. So why would you go back to the same properties?
And a lot of times you will get somebody that first of all, it's very hard for somebody to commit to doing that testing. You're an interactive person. You're here on a commission right now. There's a lot of people in our system that go to work Monday through Friday that don't want to be bothered with anything and don't want to participate in such a study. So that's one of the problems. And we interchange. We try to get as many, the users as possible to participate. But in this case, it was tough to get the minimum requirement this go around. There's a lot of letters that go out, and there's a lot of letters that don't come back raising their hand that says, I'll participate.
How many people, or what is the sampling?
I don't know I really couldn't tell you. I wouldn't want to guess. That are out there. Like I said, it has to be. We have to submit in a sampling plan to, the DEP, and we have to show that it's representative of our entire system that we're getting, and really sampling. To give you an example, this year we had a test for other things in our water that we've never tested for before. There's no regulations on them, but EPA and DEP asked us to sample for these things. Then they'll collect that data. They'll look at that data across the United States. And then in a couple of years, they'll write a regulation based on this is a new contaminant that we consider, and this is what the levels are going to be, because it's going to be a random. I mean, it's not going to be random, but it's going to be some type of a composite of all the stuff across the United States. That now they set limits. They're going to, they're going to take the deviation. They're going to look at everything in the middle. They're going to throw out and they're going to say these people in the high have to come into compliance with it. So that's just the way that the everything works in the water industry. So they're always changing. They're always lowering limits. And in this case, if people are cheating, shame on them. But what I'm trying to say is we follow the letter of the law, and we go out and we test at the people's faucets.
And Rob, in this latest sampling, we have a clean bill of health.
Yes.
Just like to make that clear.
Yeah, like I said, we really don't have anything in our system that would cause a problem. Except for what people have in their homes. So we try to target areas that are older homes so that we can see if they have older, now if you look at a brand new construction, you're not using copper pipe and anything else in your system anymore. It's all PVC plastics and everything else. So you target the older homes that you're looking at to make sure that you find if there is any problems.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bolton.
Thank you.
Was there anything further, Mr. Bazinski?
No, I think that's it. I mean, basically, it's just wanted to raise awareness that there are potential problems. And
yes, thank you. Thank you for doing so. We appreciate that. Are there any other members' matters?
I have one. When I was on the Utility Commission a year or so ago, I think we passed a resolution that I requested regarding some kind of reporting mechanism, both before the utility group and as well as the city commissioners, on incidents. I don't think it was ever implemented. I saw it in your goals that were drafted for this year. I just would like some reassurance that, in fact, it is becoming a standard practice, and that, in fact, you are hearing from the city manager and his delegates about the cause of the incidents when they do occur. And obviously we had a number particularly difficult in Grand Harbor over a couple of weeks, a month ago or so. And that there is a plan of action. I mean, I think this idea that the capital expenditures were deferred is an inadequate answer.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think that if, in fact, you're going to cause these kind of complications for the consumers and citizens of this area, we've got to be more attentive and, I think, more proactive.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We did state that as our goal for this year. We had not established a timeline for reports, though. Mr. O'Connor, do you want? I think we should. Thank you for bringing that up. I think we need to establish a timeline. We had not stated at that time what would be appropriate intervals for reports. Should it be monthly, quarterly? I think at least quarterly.
I think quarterly would be good. Also, you had that presentation from the utility director as to what we were doing to be proactive, such as putting the guards, the squirrel guards and the bird guards and all that other stuff.
Yeah, so that was helpful.
And I think quarterly he could give an update as to where we are and if we've had any significant outages and what those causes were.
All right. Then I think we should put it on the next agenda, the agenda for April.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
And we're going through, because of the wind now, we're going through cutting trees. And if you drive down A1A, you will see. And not everyone's extremely happy about that, but those who had blinking lights are a little more happier.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so we'll make that an agenda item for April. Are there any other items that anyone would like to suggest for the agenda in April? All right, seeing none. Any other members' matters?
I just have a question. How did we end up meeting on Tuesday mornings? Is that like set in stone that meetings for our group have to be on Tuesday mornings? Is there any flexibility in their meeting schedule?
I'll leave that to the clerk.
Okay.
It was the commission that decided it. After a conversation, previously, they decided that 9 o'clock was better. It is up to you as long as the calendar allows you to do it. Okay. All right. If you want to bring that up, put it on your next agenda to discuss, we can do that.
Would you like that on the agenda?
I think I would, yes.
All right. Okay.
I believe when that
Yeah,
was
I'd like to
passed,
see
that the other mornings, people, the commissioners at that time had issues because they were out Wednesday morning, and there were concerns of some commissioners about Wednesday morning and so forth. And they settled on Tuesday morning as the least obstructive.
Well, I know it is for me, and these meetings often run long, so we know we have to start early.
Right, and is there a possibility it can start early? I don't know what staff constraints are.
Well, I think not. By early, I meant 9 o'clock. I think some commissions start later.
Is 9 o'clock as early as it can start?
It's best, yes, because we open City Hall at 8:30, so
Okay.
to set up, yes.
Yeah.
I'm burning through my vacation time.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments? All right, then we stand adjourned.